The Widow, episode 03. 2 years after the tragic death of her beloved Ricardo, the beautiful and strong Isabela still struggled against the shadow of grief. Her heart, a vault locked with 7 keys, resisted any approach. But then Daniel appears, a mysterious and charming man who observes her from afar, intrigued by her aura of mystery and suffering. He approaches slowly, carefully, like someone unraveling a riddle. A riddle that hides a dark secret. Ricardo's brother, Renato, watches her with hatred in his eyes, swearing to prevent, at all costs, Isabela from finding happiness again. A dangerous game begins, between the love that is reborn and the vengeance that approaches. What will happen? 2 years. 2 long years since Ricardo, the man Isabela had loved with all her heart, had passed away forever. The memory of his smile, his touch, was a knife twisting inside her, a constant pain that accompanied her like a shadow. Isabela built impenetrable walls around her heart, walls so high and strong that not even an army could bring them down. She swore never to love again, never to allow herself to be vulnerable. Her house, once a haven of love, was now a cold, silent castle, decorated with the melancholy of longing. Every corner whispered memories, every object held a story, a piece of the past that Isabela desperately fought to forget. Then Daniel appeared. Like a ray of sunshine breaking through the darkness, he appeared in Isabela's life, but in a different way. He wasn't like the other men who had tried to approach her. He didn't bombard her with flowers and passionate declarations. Daniel observed. He observed from afar with a watchful and careful gaze, like an investigator studying a complex case. He saw her, not as a grieving widow, but as a strong, beautiful, mysterious woman, like an intriguing puzzle that he longed to solve. Isabela felt his gaze. A strange sensation ran through her every time she encountered him by chance somewhere. It was a subtle shiver, an unease that stirred her armor of grief. She found herself observing him too, intrigued by his persistence, his calm, and his elegant way of approaching. Daniel was like a gentle breeze that began to shake the ice fortress she had built around herself. Her heart, silent for so long, gave a few light beats, a silent warning that something was changing inside her, and that frightened her. But there was another observer. Renato, Ricardo's brother, a man marked by anger and envy. He had always loved Isabela, silently, secretly, a toxic love that was never reciprocated. Ricardo's death for Renato was not a tragedy, but an opportunity. A chance to finally possess Isabela, even if it meant using dark methods. He watched her with eyes full of hatred, his fists clenched, his soul consumed by revenge. Renato saw in Daniel a threat to his obsession, to his chance. He couldn't accept the possibility of Isabela being happy again, of forgetting Ricardo and falling in love with another man. For him, Isabela was a possession, a trophy that belonged to him by right. Thus, a dangerous game began. A game of love and hate, of attraction and rejection, where Isabela was the prize, and Daniel and Renato, 2 implacable opponents, fought for her soul. The flowers that Daniel left at the entrance of Isabela's house, a subtle sign of his admiration, were soon found crushed, lifeless under Renato's feet, a silent message, a warning that his approach was unwanted and dangerous. Daniel, however, was stubborn. He did not let himself be intimidated by the implicit threat, did not shy away from the challenge. He knew that Isabela was not an easy task, a sweet whisper. She was a fortress, a dormant volcano, but he was determined to win her love without forcing her. Isabela, in turn, was confused. The feelings she felt for Daniel were as surprising as they were terrifying. It was as if a seed, dormant for years, was beginning to sprout in her arid heart. She felt the warmth, the strength, and the resilience that Daniel possessed, the love that he offered her with care, patience, and without haste. But the shadow of Ricardo, the memory of her pain, the threat of Renato, created a whirlwind of emotions within her, an internal battle between hope and fear. She knew that surrendering to love again could hurt her deeply, but the promise of happiness, of a new life, called her out of her walls of grief. The full moon illuminated the garden, a silent witness to the tension that hung in the air. Daniel, sitting on a bench, watched Isabela from a distance. His gaze, soft and tender, revealed his admiration, his growing passion. Renato, hidden in the shadows, clenched his fists, his gaze fixed on that scene, like poison dripping through his veins, fueling an insatiable hatred. The game had begun, and Isabela's destiny was in the hands of these 2 men, one fighting for her love, the other for her destruction. Which one would win her heart? Love or revenge? The answer was about to be revealed. 2 years of silence, 2 years of mourning, 2 years of a heart turned to ice. Isabela found herself imprisoned in her own grief, the memory of Ricardo, her beloved, a constant specter that haunted her. Every corner of the house whispered his name, every object was a fragment of a happy past that now hurt like an open wound. But then Daniel, a man different from all the others, who did not harass her with passionate declarations, but observed her, studied her as if she were a fascinating enigma to be deciphered. He saw her beyond the pain, beyond the mourning. He saw the strong and beautiful woman who hid behind the tears. Isabela felt his gaze, a shiver that broke the ice shell she had built herself. It was as if a small flame, almost invisible at first, was beginning to melt the cold that enveloped her. A delicious fear, a timid hope, bloomed in her dormant heart, and it frightened her. The possibility of loving again seemed so distant, so dangerous. It was as if she were about to approach a precipice, the abyss of pain calling her back. But there was Renato, a sinister shadow looming over the possibility of a new happiness. Ricardo's brother, consumed by a possessive and morbid love, saw in Daniel an enemy to be defeated. He couldn't accept that Isabela could find peace, joy in another man's arms. For Renato, Isabela was a possession, a trophy that belonged to him by right, and Ricardo's loss was not a tragedy, but an opportunity. The delicate flowers that Daniel left at Isabela's door, a discreet gesture of admiration, were found crushed, destroyed, a silent declaration of hatred. A silent war began, a dangerous game in which love and revenge clashed. Daniel, however, was not intimidated. He did not retreat, his perseverance a testament to his passion. He understood the fortress that Isabela was, and respected her time, her mourning. His approach was patient, careful, like someone watering a fragile plant, without haste but with firmness. Isabela, torn between fear and hope, felt like a lost ship in a stormy sea. The whirlwind of emotions made her oscillate between rejection and attraction. Daniel saw her differently, not as a sad widow, but as a complete, strong, and independent woman, worthy of being loved. His love was not an assault, but a respectful offering, a subtle and constant demonstration of affection. But the shadow of Ricardo was immense, and the threat of Renato a constant weight. Every encounter, every glance exchanged with Daniel was an internal battle, a struggle between the fear of being hurt and the desire to be happy. The memories of the past fought with the possibility of an uncertain future. Isabela was at a crossroads, her heart divided between the pain of the past and the promise of a new dawn. In the garden, under the moonlight, the tension was palpable. Daniel, sitting on a bench, watched Isabela from a distance, his gaze full of admiration, of contained desire. Renato, hidden in the darkness of the trees, watched the scene with hatred, his soul corroded by envy, the poison of revenge fueling his actions. He was preparing his next move, planning his next trap. The game of love and hate reached its climax, and Isabela's destiny was in the hands of these two men who fought in a silent war for her heart, for her soul. Love or revenge? The answer was very close, hidden in the shadows, about to be revealed, and the suspense held one's breath. The full moon bathed Isabela's garden in a silvery, almost magical light. Daniel, sitting on an old wooden bench, watched her from afar. Isabela, with her back to him, watered the red roses, the same ones Ricardo had loved so much. She was serene, but the fragility in her shoulders betrayed the internal battle she was waging. Daniel sighed, the scent of roses mingling with the soft perfume Isabela wore, a perfume that reminded him of a distant dream. He stood up, determined to take another step. After all, he had already won her admiration, her friendship. It was love that he sought, the chance to unravel the icy heart of Isabela. But he didn't know that his approach would trigger an avalanche of events. Suddenly, a branch snapped with a loud crack near the trees. Isabela turned, startled, her dark eyes wide. In the midst of the shadows, Renato's figure emerged, like a vengeful ghost emerging from the darkness. His face was contorted with fury, the anger radiating from him like suffocating heat. He carried an object in his hand, hidden behind his back. Isabela recoiled, her eyes fixed on the eyes of her deceased husband's brother, a deep fear freezing her blood. Daniel, upon seeing Renato, felt a pang of fear. He had already suspected the man's malicious intentions, but he had never imagined that he would be so audacious. This was the crucial point, the moment when everything would change forever. Renato took a step forward, his voice low and hoarse, cutting through the silence of the night. He spat on the ground, a gesture of contempt, before directing a deadly gaze at Isabela. "You won't escape me," he hissed, the words slithering like venomous snakes. "Ricardo was my brother, and you've always been mine?" He was about to attack when Isabela reacted, an unexpected strength taking over her body. 2 years of mourning, of pain, were transformed into pure adrenaline. She would not let herself be subjugated by Renato's blind hatred. With surprising speed, Isabela grabbed a nearby ceramic vase and threw it at Renato, hitting him squarely in the arm. The sound of the shattering vase echoed through the night, breaking the tense silence. Renato screamed in pain while Daniel finally approached, carefully with the speed and precision of a feline. He was not a man of violence, but he would not hesitate to protect Isabela. The fight began, fast and violent. Daniel, despite being taller and stronger, did not have the hatred that drove Renato. It was an unequal fight, a confrontation between reason and blind passion, tenderness and revenge. Isabela, despite her fear, did not stand still. She picked up a stone from the ground and threw it at Renato, distracting him for a moment and giving Daniel the opportunity to immobilize him. It was a difficult, exhausting fight. Daniel defended himself against Renato's furious blows, who attacked him with superhuman strength, as if fueled by a demon. The fight lasted what seemed like an eternity, a whirlwind of punches, kicks, and falls. The moon witnessed the brutal scene, bathing them in its cold and implacable light. Suddenly, in the midst of the confusion, Renato pulled out a knife. Isabela's eyes widened in horror. She screamed, the sound tearing through the night. Daniel threw himself in front of Isabela, receiving the blow in her place. He fell, his shirt stained red, a cry of pain escaping his lips. Isabela threw herself on him, tears streaming down her face as the knife fell to the ground, a final sign of the end of the fight. Renato, wounded and defeated, fell to his knees. Isabela looked at Daniel, her beloved, her savior. His strength, his ability to love, had overcome Renato's savage hatred. The victory was bitter, tainted by pain, but the seed of love sprouted, strong and alive, in the midst of a night full of shadows under a full moon as a witness. The fight was over, but the battle for Isabela's heart was only just beginning, stronger and more intense than ever. The full moon, a silent witness to that tense night, bathed the garden in a silvery light. Isabela, with her back to Daniel, watered the red roses, the same ones that Ricardo had loved so much. The fragility in her shoulders, however, betrayed the internal battle she was waging. Daniel, watching her from afar, felt his heart fill with hope and desire. He was preparing to approach, to once again try to reach Isabela's icy heart, when a branch snapped with a loud crack. Isabela turned, startled, her eyes meeting Renato's, emerging from the shadows like a vengeful ghost. Fury contorted his face, the anger radiating like suffocating heat. He held something behind his back, hidden in the darkness. An object that foreshadowed danger. Fear froze Isabela's blood. Renato advanced, his hoarse voice hissing in the silence of the night. "You won't escape me, Isabela. Ricardo was my brother, and you've always been mine." He was about to attack when Isabela reacted with surprising strength, as if the 2 years of pain transformed into pure adrenaline. She would not let herself be subjugated. With incredible speed, she grabbed a ceramic vase and threw it at Renato, who screamed as he felt the impact on his arm. The vase shattered, the sound cutting through the tension. Daniel, without hesitation, approached. The fight began, a whirlwind of quick, violent movements. Renato, fueled by blind hatred, was a ferocious opponent. Daniel, despite his strength, was surpassed by Renato's fury. The fight was unequal, a confrontation between reason and passion, tenderness and revenge. Isabela, despite her fear, did not stand still. She picked up stones from the ground, throwing them to distract Renato and give Daniel a chance. However, the fight took an unexpected turn. In a moment of blind fury, Renato pulled out a knife, his gaze fixed on Isabela. Isabela's scream of terror cut through the night. Daniel, with a quick and desperate movement, threw himself in front of Isabela, receiving the blow in her place. He fell, his shirt stained red, a cry of pain escaping his lips. Isabela ran to him, tears mingling with the blood flowing from the wound. Renato, wounded and defeated, fell to his knees, watching the scene. The fight was over, the victory was bitter, but the seed of love seemed to sprout, stronger than ever. Isabela knelt beside Daniel, her fingers lightly touching the deep cut in his chest. The blood flowed, a constant and frightening stream. She looked at Daniel, his face pale, his eyes full of pain, but with an unwavering glimmer of tenderness. He tried to smile, a weak and painful smile, but one that carried the full weight of his love for her, but his eyes began to close. Slowly, heavily, Renato, fallen to the ground, watched everything with an expression of disbelief. His plan had failed. He had lost. Hatred consumed him, but the strength of the feelings between Isabela and Daniel had prevailed. He couldn't believe that all this had happened, but he had no more strength, his body failing. Daniel's breathing became shallower. Isabela cried, desperate. Then, with the last threads of his strength, Daniel opened his eyes, even weaker. He gestured with his hand, seeking Isabela's hand. He whispered an almost inaudible phrase, something about loving her, and then, His fingers loosened, his hand fell inert, his eyes closed forever. Isabela screamed, a cry of agony that tore through the silent night, but something moved in Daniel's hand. A small metallic object, shining faintly in the moonlight, a small recorder. A recorder that could change everything, revealing a secret that would forever change the course of events and the direction of the struggle between love and hate. "What is recorded on this small device?"